Salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. And do I have an upload to share with you? Before we get into it, a quick couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Ned Only. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button. Takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? Right, so today's upload, very terrifying, and you can actually verify it with the news, and I will verify it with you during this upload. Now, where this occurred, it occurred in Utah. And many of you guys know from the deep dive that I've done, looking into portals and dogmen and other paranormal activity that goes around in Uinta County, which is right next to Duchesne County. And Uinta is home of Skinwalker Ranch. I really believe that what happened to Henry and his good friend Carl has a lot to do with the relation of where the ranch is to where they were fishing. It is only about a 52-minute drive, about an hour drive from where they were fishing to Skinwalker Ranch. Now, they had been in an area just outside of Ashley National Forest. They were just west of it, and they were fly fishing. They had fly fished this area for years and years. This is nothing new to them. The Uinta River. Now, when I say years and years, it is almost like the Tom Mezek case where they had been fishing or hunting in the Adirondacks for 30, 40 years. Nothing had ever happened. Pretty similar to this. So Carl, Henry had gone up here for about 20 years. Not longer than Tom Mezek and his family and friends, but 20 years, give or take. And they would take their four-wheelers out. They had kind of like a yurt, which is similar to a tent. It's made out of canvas. It is a tent made out of the same material as the modern day teepees that you would see at like powwow on a powwow circuit and such. You can also have a portable wood stove and stuff. You can camp in a year round. So they would load up their four-wheelers. They had two four-wheelers, and each one had a four-wheeler. They'd load up whatever they needed for their trip. 2-week trip. This is something they did every year. And they would set their camp up and fish right in the same location that they have. Carl and Henry's dads brought them there when they were kids. So this is, second nature for these guys. Now, they had nothing happened. Nothing has ever happened to either one. They've never had a paranormal experience, not once, growing up in Utah and growing up in a close proximity to Skinwalker Ranch. So where they are, beautiful, isolated spot, the Uinta River, kind of just gorges right through this beautiful piece of land in Duchesne County. They, like I said, they've never had any paranormal experience ever. So they're set up and they're fishing for quite some time. They're not done with their trip. They didn't just begin and they weren't about to end. They were probably 8 to 9 days in, a little longer than halfway, he said. So I'd say 9 days out of a 2-week trip. And at that point, at one night, they were outside of their yurt sitting, just staring out into the river, admiring nature, just getting away from the everyday life, just everyday life. And they started to notice what they originally thought it was a UFO. They started to notice these kind of lights glowing off in the distance. They would start to say, "Oh my God, look, what is that up there?" And at one point, Carl said, I don't think that's a UFO, Henry. He's like, that's something totally different. That's much smaller than a UFO, but much closer than a UFO would be. Yes, from where we are sitting and observing this, it would appear, to be a UFO, but I think it's something else. And they watched and watched, and then they started to see more. And it was almost like out of this original glowing, it is an orb, we will get to that. Out of this original glowing orb, there would be just like these offshoots of them. And it got to be about 6 or 7 of these orbs. And they went from this whitish blue color, the initial orb was a whitish blue color, to all different random colors, yellow, green, red, white, blue, and just sailing around in the sky. Almost like you would see when bees, like those big fat bumblebees, when they're buzzing in the sky and they'll hit each other and stuff. Very similar to what that looks like. And this was their first paranormal experience they ever had at this location. Per Henry, Carl apparently had some pretty strange experiences with what we know as shadow people. And the second he said that to me, there were 3 or 4 connections that I was making in my head to Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta County. And I'm thinking, holy cow, and I had to find out exactly how close they were in relation to. And like I said, it's about an hour's drive. If you, as crow flies, went through there. Very close. You don't get closer. And then be in the depths of the wild like these guys were. So, direct correlation to Skinwalker Ranch. I started to think about how Axelrod, I believe Jonathan Axelrod, one of the gentlemen who was responsible for looking into the Nimitz UFO case, had investigated the case, then gone to Skinwalker Ranch and shared that information, went over that information in depth with 3 other highly decorated and highly ranked naval intelligence officers. Afterward, Axelrod goes home to Virginia, and what starts happening but shadow men in his home, orbs, dogmen being seen by his family. So to me, when Henry said Carl had, a shadow man experience at his home, and as he's describing these orbs, I'm thinking, whoa, this is very interesting. And I immediately said, have any of you guys back prior to when Skinwalker Ranch was owned by the Shermans, had you ever been there or been close to it and such? And both had been close to it at one point before NIDS and the U.S. government had got involved and really closed it off to the public. You have to have almost like a clearance, security clearance to get in. And, so I was like, all right, well, that might explain why the shadow men and orbs, this gentleman had seen shadow men, because in that surrounding area of Skinwalker Ranch, they had interviewed some high-ranking members in the Mormon church, police officers, Native American, regular, everyday housewives. They interviewed all these people that lived within like a 6-mile radius, and you would be shocked at how many people had seen dogmen or orbs. So this is very interesting in the relation to the location. Now, he had told me that Carl's experiences had been shared to Carl, or from Carl to Henry, that he had been home by himself. His wife had gone on some sort of trip with her family and friends. Not family and friends, but sister and friend. Pretty much just some sort of trip they had gone. And he was sitting in his living room one night. He was watching TV. He did not drink, so he was not inebriated or any kind of hallucinogenics were in his system. He was pretty much a straight and narrow guy. He had been sitting watching TV, and out of the corner of his eye, he saw what his brain said, my wife is home. There's a figure that just walked by my peripheral. He had called out his wife's name and waited for a reply. Didn't hear any kind of noise. Peeked his head out, and there's nothing there. And he's like, that's really weird. All right. And he sits back down. He proceeds to go throughout his night. And he gets up to go into his room and go to bed. As he's turning the TV off, he is going to be enveloped in darkness for only a split second until he can click the hall light on. He does this, and as he's walking to his hall, which is not even 10 feet, standing directly in front of him, like if a burglar had broken into his home and was daring him to stop him, it was directly in front of him, this black shadow figure. And it was darker than the dark of the night that was in his home. There was very few night lights in his home, so he could see. And he sees it instantly and just jumps back like, holy shit. Says something, and it just dematerializes right in front of him. He flicks that light on, And because his night lights weren't bright enough for it, it almost magnified whatever this was. Turns that light on and there's nothing there. He couldn't hear any running, nothing, just gone. And he just shakes his head because now he's seen something from his peripheral, and now there's something standing, right in front of him. Just how do you, deal with that? You're in your home, you're all alone, da-da-da. Now, that was his shadow person experience. So when Henry told me all this, I'm like, all right, and then they had seen these orbs. Now, going back to the case of the Nimitz, when Axelrod and 2 other members of the Naval Intelligence had been sitting there, they would, when they got home, his wife would hear kind of walking, wake up, look, shadow man, just unbelievably terrifying. So then another member of that same team, his wife, and it was so weird because the people who went on this investigation and then went and worked with NIDS at the time at Skinwalker Ranch, the family members, not the men that were at the ranch reviewing all of this information, but the family members were becoming a target. So, direct correlation in my eyes. I may be wrong, but, it's, to me, just too many things being too similar. And I don't believe that there are coincidences in any of this research and experiences that are happening. So they're sitting, watching these things, and they start to, just laugh about it because it isn't frightening. They honestly are wondering just what is going on. Initially, they thought it was UFOs, but then they realized that it's definitely not. It's something called orbs. And Carl brings that up. And Henry is not or wasn't into anything paranormal. He was very skeptical. He had, believed in certain conspiracies. I hate that word. Truths. Obviously, he, little older than I am. He's familiar with Bill Cooper and stuff. And familiar with Skinwalker Ranch. But even he, at one point, had a hard time believing that anything happened on Skinwalker Ranch. Because he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, obviously, but they watch these orbs kind of do this light show in the sky, and then almost as quickly as they began, they ended, and they just kind of sit out of their yurt for a little bit. And as the night is winding down, the fire is burning down, they're not drinking any kind of alcohol. They're literally just having their men's time. And they're wait for the fire to die down to embers. And eventually they're getting ready to go into the yurt and crash out for the morning. And a good day of fishing, and just the same kind of day after day, go to bed, wake up, fish. Go to bed, wake up, fish. Put your waders on and go fishing for some trout. And apparently, via per Henry, this area in the Uinta River is just loaded with trout, and some beautiful, beautiful fresh eating. pretty much that what they brought with them to eat was just to go along with the fish they were going to catch. And they weren't going hungry. So they are getting ready to head in and go to bed, and almost he doesn't believe, well, he does believe now, but at that point he doubted what Carl was saying to him at this very moment, because they're getting ready to go into their yurt and crash out for the night. And where the orbs were last seen doing this kind of light dance, they heard this kind of rumble, this very loud but almost an unexplainable sound. He said it was just so weird. He had seen videos of those trumpets in the sky, that the sound of the trumpets, and something similar to that. But then there was this flash of light that was really close to the ground, almost on the ground. And it wasn't like, and I suggested something just to see, because when I do talk to people and they share their experiences, even in interviews, and that's why I talk to people prior to an interview, I will kind of make mention of something, that it could have been. And, I did say, hey, have you ever heard of ball lightning? And he said, yeah, this was definitely not that, though, because when it did finally kind of explode, no better term for it, it wasn't like this outward projection and upward. It was almost like this rounded, bright, whitish yellow light illuminated right below where these orbs had been flying. This sound was undescribable to any other sound he had ever heard. And as soon as they turn to see it, it lights up this little vicinity of where they are. And then it almost like implodes on itself. So the noise and the light just gone. And they both look at each other. And Carl looks at Henry and says, I don't know, buddy. He goes, but that sure was strange, don't you think? And that's one of the things he remembers vividly from that night, and he and Carl, their conversation that night. So they go to bed, and they talked about it a little bit as they're crashing out. They've got these fold up cots and stuff, so they are roughing it, but essentially, you've got a wood stove in your yurt and two kind of cots to crash out in. You're pretty comfortable. You're with your best friend. You're good. And he says, I don't know. Maybe it was something totally explainable. Could have been something that we do. Maybe someone's out there with a firework. Yeah, okay, that's a firework. And they go to bed. They get up next morning, and they get up, go out, have some coffee, and make a quick breakfast. Nothing is out of the ordinary. Their night sleep was great. It was just nothing. It would have been different if there was something in the distance that, like any kind of clue of what that light was. But so they almost forgot about it as they're, done drinking their coffee, having breakfast, and getting ready to put their waders on and go fishing. And especially Henry at this point is not thinking anything other than fishing. He's not thinking about the orbs. He's not thinking about whatever they had just witnessed, which I will be candid with you right now. I believe that it was a portal, and so does Henry to this day. Well, you'll see why Henry does momentarily because it is a tragic case, and one literally you can verify. I verified it online. So they get up, they go fishing, and they start to, they're not where their yurt is. It's not too far off of the river. So they're maybe walking 100, 200 feet right from, and then going right in and just fly fishing. And so Henry looks at Carl and says, I kind of want to satisfy my my curiosity. So let's take a walk that way, and we'll see if we can see anything. We'll see if there's anything that can identify what we both saw last night. And they agree, and they walk to the vicinity of, and there's nothing there. There's nothing, At one point in the cot, or in the yurt that night prior, Henry was thinking, maybe it was fireworks, and it was just a bunch of kids dicking around. And Carl's like, well, how'd they get this far out? It's not like we're off a dirt road and you just pull right up. Whoever it was would have had to travel a distance to do this. They then decide, hey, let's go fishing. So they walk out into the river and start fishing. And day's going great. They've got a couple fish. And Carl's like, I need to go and relieve some pressure in my stomach. And, there's a laugh, an audible laugh, by Henry. All right, buddy. You want to get lunch? You want to go back to camp and have lunch? Are you hungry? Carl, after I go to the bathroom really quick, I'll go dig my latrine in the woods and, this and that. And then we'll go get some lunch. But why don't you just stay put for now, and then I'll come and get you after I'm done. So maybe 10 minutes go by, and Carl comes out and he says, all right, let's go get some lunch and this and that. And Henry realizes that his waders are off. They're not even on. They're off. So it was almost like Carl was done fishing. So at this point, you've got just Henry out there. Carl is, back out in the woods a little ways. And he doesn't, to this day, he doesn't have any idea of why he turned. Because there was no noise like the night prior. There was none of that weird kind of sounds. There was nothing that would have provoked him to turn around and look around. It was daytime, so a light wouldn't. But he's standing there fishing, and he, for some reason, just has this overwhelming urge to turn around. And it was almost like something was watching him, but no, there was something different. He had some kind of different feeling that was behind him. And he was like, maybe it was Carl. Maybe Carl's lost. I don't know. And, he doesn't know. But he turns to look on shore, and what he sees is this very small, almost like the size of an orb that they had seen last night or the night prior, and it's hovering maybe 3 to 4 feet above the ground. And as he's watching it, he's like, just trying to figure out what this is. It starts to grow in size. Almost as if it was growing outward and upward and down at the same rate of speed, and creating this rather large, kind of glowing opening. So he stumped, and he's really scared. He winds his pole up quick because he's kind of like, what am I looking at? You know, and he yells Carl's name, because wherever, from him standing in the river looking back, he didn't know which way Carl had gone, but Carl would be behind this. So this was in between wherever Carl was and Henry was. And Henry yells out to Carl, and he does it 2 or 3 times, and Carl says, "Hang on, I'm coming out. I'll be right there. You know, they're roughing it, you know, essentially, you know. And when roughing it, and you have to go to the bathroom, you usually bring a portable shovel with you, like something about that big, and you dig your hole, and then you cover it up. It's just a respect thing for nature. I know we used to do that in Boy Scouts when we would be camping out in when we'd go up to like Peak Mountain and the Siamese Ponds up in the Adirondacks. You know, it's not state sanctioned camping, but you respect the area. So he yells out again. He says, "Listen, I don't know what this is, buddy, but you need to get out here, and you need to see this with your own eyes." And he's looking at this opening. He can clearly figure out that it's definitely something different because he can't see through it. You know, it's all it is this bright kind of light that grew in front of him from the size of an orb to now about 3.5 feet high to maybe 4 feet high to 3.5 by 4 feet wide. And as he yells again for Carl, he sees what looks like some movement in this light. And he starts to step away from the shore. So he's walking deeper into the river. And there are some pretty... One, it's moving rapidly. It's not like, you know, white caps, but it's a fast-moving water. 2, that there are some deep little parts to it. So, you know, he inadvertently steps backward and hits a little hole. You know, he might go down 1 foot and he might go down 10 feet. You know, you don't know. So he stops, and he's now further away from the shore, and he can see Carl coming out of the woods. He can see his head, and he yells to Carl one more time. He said, "Listen, stay right there, stay right there." And Carl's like, "What do you mean?" And he starts to walk a little closer, and he sees this kind of glowing formation in front of him. And he looks over at Henry, and he's like, you know, "What is this? What is this?" And Henry goes, "There's something coming out of it. There's something coming out of it." And now, at this point, he sees a whole leg coming out in a shoulder. And he's terrified. He starts to walk toward their camp in the river. And as he, you know, keeps looking at it and making sure that whatever it is, you know, doesn't ambush him or, you know, surprise attack him, because he needs to be aware, because the leg did not and was definitely not human. There was no clothing on it. It was brownish red hair, like this very maybe auburn, I guess would be the term, and its shoulder. And as he's looking, he sees the head. So half of this thing's body is in this portal opening, and the other half is coming out as, he's watching. And he keeps walking. Carl is walking, so they're going to meet at kind of like an intersect and head back to the yurt. They both have firearms with them. And they stop immediately because what they both see, because now at this point, Carl couldn't see as he was walking down into the opening. He could only see the back part of whatever this was. The door was clearly facing where Henry was, where the water was. All of a sudden, this full-on orangish brown creature is fully out of the portal. It fully exited this portal. It's just standing there, and it looks over at Henry, and it looks at Carl, and it is 100% Dogman. It's got a large tail. It is black, brown, whatever, and red. There are all these different hints of colors to it, but the main color is this reddish, orange, brown color. And he looks and he sees the ears, and he goes, what the hell? Because he's looking in his mind a wolf that is standing bipedally, that just came out of some kind of glowing doorway to wherever, wherever. And it starts to run in his direction along the, right along the coast here. And it stops midway now between Carl and Henry to their camp. So it's just standing dead center right there. Now, like I said, dead center between the entrance of the portal or exit of Henry, Carl, Dogman, camp. And at that point, Henry yells, something to Carl. Carl yells back, and Henry was being louder than Carl. Carl came up on this. So Carl was like, holy shit, what am I looking at? Kind of in that shock state. So when he responded, it wasn't like this, yell over the river sound and whatever other natural noises were going on, which at that point, I asked him, I said, did the Oz effect hit? And he said, I don't know what that was at the time, and I don't remember. But quite possibly. And he says that Carl yells to him something about what the hell is that and what is that? And it turns and looks at Carl. And Henry remembers what its eyes looked like. These things were almost an orangish kind of hellfire. And it starts to, not run, but methodically walk back the way it had just come along that coast there, along that kind of thing, and staring at Carl. And Henry goes, don't run. Don't run. If it's a predator, it's going to chase after you. And Carl just starts running. The creature then kind of zips up to cut him off. And as he's running, he's not paying attention. He's watching this Dogman that just came out of this portal. And he's running full speed, kind of watching it. He looks at Henry. And remind you, the backside of this was not where the creature came. It came from the front, facing Henry. Well, Carl, not looking, ran right into the back of this bright light kind of opening. And there was no noise after that. It was a complete look of shock because he hit the backside of that portal and he was gone. Just like that. The Dogman then turns and looks at Henry, drops on all fours, and proceeds to run kind of in a northeast vicinity, possibly going back to the breeding program. Who knows? But as he's gone, there's nothing. The Dogman has then turned back and looked at Carl's where he just was, then looks at Henry and just starts running the same way it was going initially. And Henry kind of backs into the water a little more. It just right by him, right by their camp, and it is gone out of sight. And he's just like, what the hell did I just see? Where's my best friend? What was this creature? What do you call that? Was it that a werewolf? This is 2002. YouTube wasn't where people were, communities weren't what they are now. I actually remember Facebook, there was very little cryptid research done at this point. So this creature just gone out of sight, out of mind, and Henry drops his pole and starts running, like throws it over on the bank of this river and starts running up the river to where his friend had last been seen. He opens it, just looks, like however Carl opened that portal or whatever happened, it was just gone. So he's, running at full speed to, where's my friend? Where's this light? Can I feel around to open it? What do I do? There's no remnants of his best friend. He stops and he looks around and he looks back to where the Dogman was. Other correlation to what I just shared with you, but something that I heard in or around the vicinity of Skinwalker Ranch, which falls in the Uinta Basin, that there was a hunter and he was sitting up on a mound, a hill. He was watching for any kind of large game. All of a sudden, this portal kind of opens up down the hill, a ways away from him. It's off the ground. It's not the same color. It's a blackish color kind of. But this creature drops out of it. And it kind of just looks, around. About that, Tigger had to leave. So this hunter's sitting there, sees this portal open, this blackish portal, this unnamed cryptid falls out. I don't know if it was a Dogman, what it was. It was just a large cryptid. And it took off running in the opposite way of where that guy was sitting. He couldn't see into it because of how it was formed. But, this creature just ran. And I believe the gentleman that it happened to was a Ute, a Native American from the Ute. He got up and took off the other way and never went hunting again. So you've got portal, orbs, dogmen, all of these kind of in and around Skinwalker Ranch. Now, obviously, he immediately searches for his friend, runs back to his camp. He cannot find any kind of nothing that is any remnants of his friend. He gets on his four-wheeler and immediately contacts law enforcement. Law enforcement is involved. They question him. He's got to come up with some sort of believable story, because what is he going to say? You know, we were fishing the night before. We saw something very similar to what just happened to us today. We saw these orbs. We saw this portal open up and then close. We heard these weird noises. Then today we're fishing. The portal opens up. This werewolf-like creature, which we know as a Dogman, comes out of it, runs towards Carl and I, and then sees Carl is closer and not in the water and starts to run toward him. Carl is running directly toward the water in a way and hits this portal and disappears. He can't tell that to law enforcement. So what he says is, you know, last I saw my best friend was we were fishing and he had gone to the bathroom. I never saw him after that. Law enforcement comes out. They do an investigation. So during this investigation, obviously, they're going to be investigating Henry for any foul play. He's adamant, you know. I mean, he can't just say, hey, I saw my best friend. I saw this portal. The night before, I saw a portal with my best friend in Orbs. We saw a werewolf, which we know, Dogman. And then my friend ran into the portal and disappeared. He can't say that. One, they'd probably lock him up right then and there. So his last thing is, I saw my friend. He went to the bathroom and now he's gone. I don't know. He volunteers to help in any way. Polygraph. He does fail the polygraph. He fails on, do you know what happened to your friend? Not, did you have any involvement in your friend's disappearance? But do you know what happened to him? So there was, you know, major questions that would have pointed directly at, you know, him being guilty. He passed, but then there was some that he failed. So because he had to make that story up. After a while, you know, the way everything was going and such, they kind of said, well, we don't believe he had any involvement in it, which he didn't, you know, but it's hard to prove because, you know, if it was, even though it's inadmissible, to in courts and such, you know, they would have, they couldn't use that polygraph, but they could use it as like a source of whatever. But it just terrifying and terrible, you know. Apparently during that time there had been a few people that had gone missing. One was a guy had been submerged in a vehicle or something like that years, and they just found him like years later, 20-something years later. But the case that Carl and Henry were involved in is, this is the information that the news shares. In 2002, a man went missing in Duchesne County, Utah, while fishing, but specific details and the man's name are not mentioned. Provided search results. There's a general reference to a missing person case in Duchesne County, Duchesne County, in 2002, but no specific details. Another mention of a missing fisherman in the county, but there was another case in 2020 where a body located in a lake canyon. It's possible that the missing person case of 2002 is not directly related to that other one, directly related to fishing. So that's this validation for Carl and Henry's case. For some reason, they didn't mention his name. In the two other cases, they did mention names. The two other missing people cases. But with Carl and Henry, for some reason, the government failed to mention the name. So, in all of the events that happened surrounding Henry and Carl's case in Duchesne, there is a lot of correlation to what happened to Jonathan Axelrod and the crew of naval intelligence officers that looked into the Nimitz case. Shadow men. He had an experience with shadow men at one point, and quite the horrifying one. The Orbs. He had an experience with Orbs. He and Henry did. Dogman. Boom. The Shermans had their own, and then on top of that, the people that investigated the Nimitz Tic Tac had their family members had experiences with these creatures, which I think what really happened was the government didn't want this book or this book to come out. The two books, Hunt for the Skinwalker and the follow-up Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, they didn't want these books to come out, and that's why they used the Dogmen to possibly silence the families of the investigators looking into that case. But it's just a terrifying friggin' thing. Where did he go? What's he doing? Is that what happened to Tom Messick? Did Tom see something? I mean, Tom was old, so I doubt he ran, but I don't even know. I can't even imagine falling in or running directly into a portal. And it reminds me of, there's a case where that kid is running in his backyard. I forgot what state it happened. It was a long time ago. But he's running in his backyard. His parents are sitting on a porch watching him. And I believe early 1900s. And all of a sudden, he's there 1 minute running around in this field and then gone. The parents yell for him, "Where are you?" Yada yada. There was some vocalization heard from the kid afterward, but they never found him. They looked for everywhere. I don't know. It's crazy, but and then to have in 2002 a man went missing in Duchesne County, Utah, while fishing, but specific details and the man's name are not mentioned in provided search results. There's a general reference to a missing person case in Duchesne County in 2002, but no specific details about the man missing while fishing are provided. Other mention of a missing fisherman in Duchesne County, but the case occurred in 2021 with the body being located in. So 3 cases of disappearance, 2 are found. Carl is not. Where is he? And is he still alive on that other side of the portal? That's my biggest question. Is he still alive on that other side of the portal? Or were there more dogmen that were coming out of that portal? Or creatures, whatever. And he met his fate right at the very beginning. We probably will never know. So, with that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that helps this channel to continue to grow and go. And honestly, what gives us all a place and a chance to share experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Keeping an eye on your children, pets, family, and your friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.